communicating with each other all the time. And so this first part is just an invitation to be even more mindful of your communication than you already are. And that activity is just one little example of the power of communication and the results it can lead to. So here we have sort of an overview of from Randy Sprick. If you've been in the district for a while, you probably remember Safe and Civil Schools. We did a lot of CHAMPS. I think that comes from Randy Sprick also. So he kind of lays out a method for teaching expectations to kids and a way of reinforcing that we start by communicating our expectations before something begins. So I'm being proactive about letting kids know what I expect of them before we get started. I'm monitoring them, so I'm walking around, I'm visually scanning, are they meeting those expectations that I just laid out for them? And then providing feedback so that they know if they're hitting the mark or not. So that's sort of the overview of how to effectively teach expectations. But I really wanted to zero in on the teach part and think about how are you communicating your expectations to your students. And before I move forward, I just, full disclosure, my whole career has been centered around language. So I started my career at Puesta del Sol teaching 4th grade Spanish immersion, and then transferred voluntarily to Stevenson because they had the highest number of English language learners in the district. Like, language is my thing. So I say that just because you should know that I look at everything through the lens of language. So this is sort of what I want to just open your mind to. How many of you have at least one English language learner in your class? Will you raise your hand if you have at least one language learner in your room? So even if you have one language learner, this especially applies to you. I wrote down a quick note when I was listening to Dr. Mills this morning that he said, our students come from 112 birth countries, and a third of our students have a different language other than English. So we have a lot of diversity, and that also means different cultures. So even if they come proficient in English, there are a very wide range of expectations and school environments, and the school environment that your ELL learner might have come from might have very different cultural school expectations. And so it's really important to be thinking about how am I communicating my expectations so that all students have the chance to be successful, especially if where they came from had really different expectations. I think when I think of the equity lens, I think of that. This is how am I giving access to all students to be successful in my classroom. And what I've found the more I've dug into ELL strategies is that what works really well for ELL students works for all students. Like, what's best practice for a language learner is really best practice and kicks up engagement for all of my students. So nothing I'm sharing with you doesn't apply to all students. It's just the lens that kind of informs my thinking. So if we know that it's important to teach expectations, then my thinking is, well, how am I communicating that to kids? No, you got the big finale. Manage your expectations is not that big of a deal. One of the big ELL language gurus, Stephen Krashen, talks about this idea of input. Input is all the information that's coming to my brain all day during school. It's everything that we're telling kids, information, expectations. His theory is that that input needs to be comprehensible, that all that talking at them and providing content really means nothing unless we make it accessible to all kids. And he states students should be able to understand the essence of what is being said or presented. So I carry that around with me everywhere and think, if all I'm doing is talking at them and verbally, they've got a chance to get it like by listening to me talk, but I'm not giving them any other way to grab onto that and understand me. So I try to think of how else can I make sure that I'm communicating clearly and giving all students access to these expectations. I want them to be successful. So I was thinking, even if it's as simple, and I saw this in a classroom, and especially if you teach kindergarten, this is stuff you do a lot of because your kids can't read yet. So if you want to really make sure that something's hitting home, we draw a lot of pictures in the primary grades. If you're in a language class, you draw a lot of pictures too, because you know, if I'm saying it, that's one way for them to understand it. If I'm saying it and writing it down where they can see it and I can refer to it, that's a second way that I'm hopefully getting that information to land for them. Drawing a picture so that those words have more meaning is another way. If I'm modeling and role play, I think the bottom line is to just be aware of, so we know that we need to communicate those expectations, but can I step up my mindfulness a little bit and think about how do I tend to give that feedback, or am I aware of the nonverbal feedback I might be giving to kids, and to be more aware of this. And Greg's going to talk a little bit more about going further beyond just stating what our expectations are.